What if I told you gingerbread cookies don't have to be brown? These vibrant, colorful cookies are a bold, festive twist that will completely transform your holiday baking, impress your guests, and become the highlight of your dessert table this season. I start with 3 cups of all-purpose flour. This is the foundation of our dough, giving it the structure we need for those perfect cutout shapes. Next, I add 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking soda. This gives the cookies just the right lift, so they bake up soft but sturdy. Then I add 1/2 teaspoon of salt. A small amount goes a long way in balancing the sweetness and enhancing all the flavors. Now for the spices, this is where the holiday magic happens. I start with 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon to bring warmth and coziness to every bite. Next, I add 1 teaspoon of ground ginger for a bit of festive zing that elevates the flavor profile. Then there's 3/4 of a teaspoon of ground cloves, which adds a rich, spicy depth. Finally, I mix in 1/2 teaspoon of ground nutmeg, rounding out the aroma and creating that unmistakable holiday scent that fills the kitchen with cheer. I whisk the dry ingredients to blend spices and baking soda, guaranteeing perfect flavor. For a smoother texture, sifting works wonders. Once combined, I set the bowl aside. Now for the wet ingredients. In a medium-sized bowl, I start with 1 large egg. Making sure it's at room temperature ensures the dough blends more smoothly and improves its overall structure and texture. Next, I add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. This ingredient brings warmth and depth to the dough, tying all the flavors together in every bite. Finally, I pour in 1/2 cup of maple syrup. Its caramel-like sweetness and festive amber hue add an extra dose of holiday cheer. As a quick note, I'm preparing a double batch in this video to keep up with my holiday baking frenzy. However, the recipe measurements listed here are for a single batch, making it easier for you to adjust as needed. Each batch has its own charm, so feel free to double up if you're in the holiday spirit and want extra cookies for gifting or indulging. For healthier substitutions or ingredient tips, don't forget to visit my blog post linked in the description. For the green dough, I start with 1 teaspoon of food coloring for a soft pastel look, or 2 teaspoons for that bold, Grinch-approved green. Feel free to go wild. If you're aiming for a shade so dramatic it could light up a tree, just add a little more food coloring. Who says cookies can't steal the show? I whisk everything together until the color is fully incorporated, creating a smooth, beautiful green base that's ready to meet the dry ingredients. And why add the color now, you ask? Mixing the food coloring with the wet ingredients first ensures the color spreads evenly throughout the dough. If you wait until the dough is fully mixed, it's like trying to decorate a Christmas tree after all the ornaments are packed away. Frustrating and messy. This step guarantees every cookie bakes up with the same gorgeous color, streak-free. Plus, watching the wet ingredients transform into that festive green is always a highlight. It's like turning your kitchen into a little holiday workshop, one whisk at a time. I use a hand whisk to thoroughly mix the wet ingredients first. Whisking by hand not only combines everything evenly, but also lets me keep an eye on the consistency to ensure it's just right. If you don't have a whisk handy, a sturdy fork works just as well in a pinch. Next up, creaming the butter and sugar, a crucial step for achieving that perfect cookie dough consistency. For this task, I turn to my KitchenAid 7-quart stand mixer, and here's why. It's a powerhouse when handling thicker doughs, especially during my holiday bake-in frenzy when I'm doubling recipes. Its large capacity saves both the mixer and me from overworking, keeping the process smooth and effortless. To start, I add 3/4 of a cup of unsalted butter, softened to room temperature, into the mixing bowl. Softened butter is essential. It blends seamlessly and helps create a smooth, fluffy texture. If you're not sure how to get your butter perfectly softened without melting it, head over to my blog post, where I share 3 foolproof ways to soften butter. A total game changer for recipes like this. Next, I add 1/2 cup of packed brown sugar. This ingredient brings a subtle molasses-like sweetness that enhances the cookies' flavor while also keeping them soft and tender. Together, these 2 ingredients are the foundation for a buttery, melt-in-your-mouth cookie. Using the paddle attachment, I start the mixer on low speed to avoid a sugar cloud, then gradually increase to medium. I let it cream for about 2 to 3 minutes until the mixture is light and fluffy. This step is non-negotiable. It's what gives the cookies their tender, buttery texture. About halfway through, I pause to scrape down the sides of the bowl with a silicone spatula. This ensures every last bit of butter and sugar is fully incorporated. Trust me, taking this small extra step makes a world of difference when it comes to achieving perfectly balanced dough. Once the butter and sugar are ready, I scrape down the sides of the bowl with a silicone spatula to make sure everything is evenly mixed. Then I pour in the wet ingredients, the egg, maple syrup, vanilla, and green food coloring mixture. I mix it on low to start, then gradually increase to medium speed until everything is smooth and fully incorporated. I hope you're enjoying the process of making this bold and festive green gingerbread dough as much as I am. If you're loving this recipe, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and tap the bell so you'll never miss any of my holiday baking fun. Do you have a favorite gingerbread recipe that's a staple in your holiday traditions? Maybe one with a unique twist or a treasured family recipe? I'd love for you to share it in the comments below. Let's swap ideas and keep the gingerbread spirit alive. On my channel, I combine my passion for food photography and baking, bringing you into my kitchen to celebrate the joy of creating beautiful and delicious recipes. From vibrant cookies to stunning holiday treats, I hope you feel inspired to try something amazing. Thank you for joining me on this festive adventure. Let's roll out that dough and make some holiday magic together. Next, it's time to bring the dry ingredients into the mix. And this is where the dough really starts to come together. I add the dry mixture gradually, about 1/3 at a time, to the wet ingredients already in the bowl. Keeping the mixer on low speed is essential here, not just to avoid a flour explosion that could turn your kitchen into a snow globe, but also to ensure the ingredients incorporate evenly. Trust me, cleaning flour off your ceiling isn't exactly festive. So, take it slow. Now, I'll be honest, at this stage, I'm all about letting my mixer take the spotlight. I leave it on low speed and let it do its job at its own pace. There's no rush here. And you'll be amazed at how your trusty little helper methodically transforms the ingredients into a beautiful, even dough. It's like magic, but with less wand waving and more paddle attachment action. As the mixer works its magic, the dough will start to thicken and transform into that beautiful, pliable consistency we're aiming for. It's important to resist the temptation to crank up the speed, especially with this thick dough. High speed might save a few seconds but could easily burn out the motor on your mixer. And let's face it, your mixer is working hard enough already. No need to push it to the brink during holiday baking season. Let me share my personal secret for surviving the holiday cookie madness. I've perfected a system that keeps me sane and stress-free. I start all the way back in October by making and freezing all my cookie dough. This gives me a head start and keeps the dough fresh until I'm ready to bake. Then, in November, I roll up my sleeves and bake every single batch, freezing the cookies once they've cooled. Finally, a week before gifting, I pull them out, decorate them, and let the holiday magic begin. It's the only way I can handle the chaos of the season while still making sure everyone gets their favorite festive treats. Once the dough reaches that perfect, smooth consistency, it's time to move on to wrapping it up. Wrapping is a small but crucial step in the cookie making process that sets you up for success later. Here's how I do it. I start by laying out a large piece of food wrap on the counter, making sure it's big enough to fully enclose the dough. Then, using my trusty silicone spatula, I scoop the dough directly onto the center of the wrap. This tool is a lifesaver, ensuring I get every last bit of dough from the bowl without making a mess. Now here's where my little trick comes in handy. Instead of shaping the dough into a disc right away, I loosely fold the food wrap over the dough, tucking it in just enough to cover. This step might seem small, but it's a game changer. It keeps my hands clean and lets me work faster. Plus, if you're like me and juggling a dozen holiday baking tasks at once, anything that saves time and minimizes cleanup is a win. Once the dough is securely wrapped, I shape it into a neat flat disc by pressing down gently through the food wrap. Why a disc, you ask? Flattening the dough at this stage makes rolling it out later so much easier and more uniform. No more struggling with a lumpy, uneven block of dough. This simple prep step sets you up for smooth rolling and perfectly even cookies. Depending on the size of the batch, I usually end up with 2 or 3 discs. For this video, I'm working with a double batch, so I'm wrapping up even more dough than usual. And trust me, it's worth it. Having extra dough means more cookies to share, decorate, or just enjoy with a cup of tea. Here's a personal tip. If you're baking with kids, this step is a great way to involve them without too much chaos. My daughter loves helping me scoop and wrap the dough, and it's one of those little moments that makes holiday baking extra special. It might not be the fastest method, but it's definitely the most heartwarming. Plus, it keeps her entertained and away from sneaking spoonfuls of dough. Well, for the most part. With all the discs wrapped and ready, I pop them into the fridge to chill. This is the step where the dough gets some much needed downtime, firming up to make rolling and cutting a breeze. And don't forget, at this point, you can also freeze the dough if you're planning ahead. Just wrap the discs in an extra layer of foil or place them in freezer-safe bags. Label them clearly, and they'll keep beautifully for up to 3 months. This way, you can prep dough ahead of time and bake fresh cookies whenever you need them. It's one of my favorite holiday hacks that keeps the season feeling manageable and stress-free. This year, I'm shaking things up in the kitchen. Instead of sticking to my usual gingerbread cookie routine, I've decided to experiment with not one, not two, but multiple gingerbread flavors. And here's my secret. To keep track of all the delicious variations, I am baking each flavor in a single cookie cutter shape. It's like my little flavor coding system, so when it's time to share or sneak a taste, I'll know exactly which cookie is which. If you want to try something new with your gingerbread this holiday season, head over to my gingerbread playlist. I've got recipes for every flavor mood, from warm and spice to citrusy and bright. My personal favorite? The orange zest gingerbread. It's tangy and festive. But some of my friends swear by the spiced gingerbread for that classic holiday flavor. What about you? Let me know which flavor is your favorite. I take the disc out of the fridge and let it chill, but not too much, on the counter for about 10 minutes. Trust me, this step is everything. If it's too cold, rolling it out feels like arm wrestling a brick. Not exactly festive. Too warm, and it turns into a sticky situation nobody wants. I start by sprinkling a light layer of flour over the counter. It's my go-to trick to keep the dough from sticking. Personally, I like to throw on a pair of disposable vinyl gloves for this step. They're such a game changer when handling sticky dough, and cleanup is a breeze. But hey, if you're the kind of baker who loves getting your hands a little floury, go for it. Embrace the mess. Once that's done, I plop my unwrapped dough disc onto the floured surface, and just like that, we're ready to roll. I grab my trusty adjustable rolling pin and roll the dough to a perfect 1/4 inch thickness. The adjustable pin ensures even cookies, so no crispy edges or doughy centers to worry about. If your dough starts sticking to the pin, don't panic. Sprinkle a tiny bit of flour on top or lightly dust the rolling pin. Here's another way to roll out your dough mess-free. Sandwich it between 2 sheets of parchment paper. No flour dusted all over the counter, no sticky mess, and cleanup is as simple as tossing the parchment. Plus, it keeps the dough smooth and easy to handle. Perfect for stress-free holiday baking. grab my cookie cutters and start stamping out some festive shapes. I'm keeping it simple and classic with a Christmas tree cutter. It's always a favorite in my house. A little tip from me: stick to cutting similar sized shapes for each baking sheet. This way, all the cookies bake evenly, and you won't end up with some overbaked or underdone. Trust me, it makes a big difference. Once all the dough is cut into cookies, I carefully pull away the extra dough from around the shapes. Don't even think about tossing it. This dough is reusable gold. I always save it for the next round of rolling and cutting. Here's a handy tip from me. Gather the scraps, form them into a ball, and loosely cover it with food wrap. This keeps the dough from drying out while you're busy transferring cookies to the baking sheet. I grab my baking sheet and line it with parchment paper. Pre-cut sheets are my go-to. They save so much time, but a roll works perfectly fine too. I carefully use a cake spatula to lift each cookie off the counter and onto the parchment-lined baking sheet. This little tool, game changer. It keeps the shapes intact and saves me from accidentally squishing or stretching them. Trust me, nothing's worse than a Christmas tree that looks like it melted. If you don't have a cake spatula, no worries. A thin, flat pancake spatula or even a large butter knife can do the trick in a pinch. Just be gentle. I always make sure to space the cookies about an inch apart on the sheet. This gives them enough room to bake evenly and allows proper airflow. It's a small detail, but it makes a big difference. When I'm done cutting out the cookies, I gather up the dough scraps and press them back into a disc. Then I roll it out again to cut even more cookies. No wasting a single bit of that vibrant red dough. If the dough starts to get too soft after a couple of rounds, here's a quick fix. Pop it back into the fridge for about 10 minutes to firm it up. It'll make rolling and cutting so much easier. I keep going until every last scrap is transformed into festive little cookies. Waste not, want not, especially with something this delicious. You know, gingerbread cookies have such a fascinating history. It's like a little taste of the past with every bite. They actually go way back to ancient times, where ginger was prized for its ability to preserve food. But the gingerbread we know today really started to take shape in medieval Europe. It was often made into elaborate shapes and used to celebrate special occasions. Can you imagine people back then crafting gingerbread castles and nights for festivals? One of the coolest things is how gingerbread cookies became tied to the holidays. Queen Elizabeth I is credited with popularizing gingerbread cookies shaped like people. She had them decorated to look like her favorite courtiers. How fancy is that? Over time, gingerbread became a symbol of Christmas in so many cultures, with every region adding its own twist. And here's something fun. Did you know gingerbread cookies can be made in vibrant colors? I actually discovered this by accident while reading Modern Gingerbread by Sandra Monger at the library. It's such a creative book, and I came across a section about using food coloring to create bold, festive designs in gingerbread dough. It completely inspired me to try making red and green gingerbread cookies, and now they've become one of my favorite holiday traditions. It's amazing how even a classic recipe like gingerbread can be reinvented with a modern twist. midst of holiday baking, it's worth pausing to think about how you can make your gifts extra special without breaking the bank. Saving $1,000 on Christmas gifts might seem ambitious, but it's easier than you think when you incorporate thoughtful, homemade touches. Personalized gifts like festive cookie tins, filled with colored gingerbread cookies, or jars of homemade cocoa mix, not only save money, but also show your loved ones how much effort you've put into their presents. Trust me, these heartfelt treats will mean so much more than anything store-bought. And if you're wondering how to package these cookies beautifully without spending a fortune, I've got you covered. In another video, I'll teach you how to package your cookies on a budget. And trust me, they'll look so good no one will ever guess you didn't spend a fortune. Here's my top secret trick. Don't tell anyone. Before baking, I always sneak the baking sheet into the fridge for about 10 minutes. Why, you ask? Well, here's the science. Chilling the dough firms up the butter in the cookies, which slows down how quickly it melts in the oven. This gives the cookie structure a chance to set before spreading, keeping those shapes crisp and perfect. And here's the key. Straight from the fridge, they go right into the fully preheated oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. That's right. Make sure your oven has reached its ideal temperature before those cookies go in. No delays, no detours, just perfectly shaped cookies every single time. Now you not only know the secret, but also the science behind it. Talk about being a baking pro. All right, it's oven time. I grate my chilled baking sheet and place it right on the middle rack of my fully preheated oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the sweet spot for even baking. I bake the cookies for about 8 to 10 minutes, keeping a close watch. The edges should look just set, while the centers will still be soft. Don't worry, they'll firm up as they cool. Here's a little insider tip from me. If you've ever battled with burnt cookies, haven't we all? Start with the minimum baking time, 8 minutes here, and check on them. Your altitude above sea level plays a big role in baking, so adjust as needed. If the cookies need extra time, give them another minute. For me, baking at high altitude, 9 minutes hits the sweet spot every time. Soft centers, perfectly set edges, and no burnt bottoms in sight. Baking isn't just about creating delicious treats. It's also about keeping your space clean and ready for the next batch of fun. While the cookies are baking, and maybe another batch is chilling, it's the perfect time to tidy up the counter. Here's my quick method. I grab my trusty dough cutter and scrape up all the flour and bits of dough from the surface. It's amazing how much easier this makes cleanup. Once I've gathered the mess into a neat little pile to toss, I wipe the counter clean with a damp cloth. It's oddly satisfying, and it leaves me with a fresh workspace ready for the next round of holiday baking chaos. When the cookies come out of the oven, I let them rest on the baking sheet for about 5 minutes. This little pause gives them time to set and firm up before I move them. Then I carefully transfer them to a cooling rack to cool completely. Trust me, this step is non-negotiable if you're planning to decorate them. Warm cookies and icing, total meltdown. But if you don't have a cooling rack, no worries. You can lay the cookies out on a clean sheet of parchment paper or a kitchen towel. Just make sure they have enough space to cool evenly and don't stack them, or you'll end up with steam-softened cookies. I usually rely on my trusty cake spatula to transfer freshly baked cookies to the cooling rack because they're still soft and way too hot to handle. And now for the fun part, decorating. If you're ready to take these green gingerbread cookies to the next level, be sure to check out my next video where I'll show you how to decorate them with royal icing and add those perfect festive touches. But honestly, these cookies are already so stunning on their own that they hardly need any extra decoration. They're perfect for gifting too. Imagine how excited someone would be to open a box of these bright, festive treats. Thanks so much for baking with me today, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.